Well, hello, it's good to have you here. Thank you. I'm Dr. T, and we're going to talk about annotation today. Your first guest is my dog, Bean, who is trying to read the Sunday Review of the New York Times, but couldn't quite make it through. She got a little sleepy, a little distracted, a little unfocused, and started to drift away. That can happen when we're reading. Unless you adopt these new habits and skills and practices that I'm going to talk about that come under the umbrella of annotation. Annotation is note-taking. It's what you've been taught and probably have been doing for most of your life, but it's much more subtle and much more complex in some ways than you might have originally believed or known. So we're going to talk about annotation, how to do it, what it means, and then we're going to practice it in almost every experiment, every reading, every time we get together to do anything in our classes. And an awful lot in your professional life and sometimes in your personal life too. Annotation can look something like this. It can be highlighting, sentences, individual words, circles, arrows, exclamation points, dashes, any kind of doodle at all. There are two parts to successful annotation, and they work in different parts of the brain. The first is doodles and drawings. If you doodle on what you're reading, then you are interacting cognitively with the ideas, with the content, with the structure that you're looking at on the page. It can be any kind of doodling. I tend to like underlining. Underlining means this is really important. Or I'll put a hash out in the margin. A hash means, yeah, take a look at this. Or an asterisk. An asterisk means, whoa, you're going to want to bring this into your essay. This is so good. Don't miss this. But you could use lightning bolts, smiley faces, clouds, it doesn't matter. But some kinds of symbols that have meaning to you, and then when you go back to them when you're reviewing your annotations, will remind you why you did them. So the first is symbols. The second is words. You have to use words. It's a combination of the symbols, which are a kind of language, and then the actual language that we use. Can be full sentences, can be paragraphs, can be individual words. You might write, wow, in the margin. You might write, this is really important, it connects back to that first paragraph. Or you could write, here's a summary of what I just read. According to Copernicus, the stars are, and you summarize your information using language. So those two skills, combining symbol system and words. Any text can be annotated. Now we need to define what a text is. A text could be a police officer giving you directions to the park that you write down. A text could be a movie whose lines were so funny you want to share them with your friends. A text could be a geography textbook. It could be a letter from a friend. It could be a walk through the park where you write down the names of birds that you see. Anytime you engage with external information and write about it, or catalog it, or use the read-write part of your brain, you are annotating. See, this is my other dog, Nut, and she's a smart tag dog. She's so smart, she knows how to annotate too. The point of annotation is to learn how to distinguish, to make hierarchies of what's important and why they are important. So you would write in your text, or use sticky notes, or index cards, in ways to help separate what's important to you, to the author, and what is not, to help you see patterns, to help you make connections between important points, or to remind yourself that you want to come back to this idea in an essay you're going to write, in a quiz you're going to have to take. There are lots and lots of different ways to annotate. The key is that you are engaging with the text while you are actually engaging with the text. Annotation is useful everywhere. It's useful in your professional life, or when your boss tells you some elements that you need to complete, or sends you on an errand, or when you are working as a manager and you're letting other people know what they need to do, you've come in with your notes, that's a kind of annotation. It's useful in your personal life when you're sitting down in a relationship and it's time to have a serious conversation. I'm just kidding. No, it's true. You just say to your spouse, you say, or your partner, you say, wait, what you're saying is really important, so I want to annotate. Can you give me just a second to get my notebook? Okay, maybe it wouldn't work as well there. But in your academic experience, it will definitely work well when you know you have a quiz coming due, when you know you have to write an essay, when you need to remember all the bones or how to mix different viscosities of cement. All of these are elements that you want to retain. And annotation's key goal is that it helps you retain information. Why might that be important? Because when you are annotating, you are reading with a purpose. And this is the key technique for annotation, is that you know why you're reading and what your goal is in the reading. Sometimes reading is just for pleasure. Maybe you've got a rocking chair in the foyer and you come out with a cat and a cup of Earl Grey tea and the light is streaming down and you have hours and hours to read and enjoy the book that you've selected in your book club. Most of us don't get to read like that. Most of us have 3 or 4 classes we're taking. We've got work, we've got families, we've got dogs to walk. So our time is valuable, and having a goal for how to use our reading time allows us to use that reading time more efficiently. You will forget 90% of what you read within 8 hours of having read it. That means if you spent 2 hours reading a textbook, you're only going to retain about 20 minutes of it, maybe only 10, unless you annotate. Annotation is an opportunity to study while you're reading. And that's what the cognitive studies tell us, is if you study what you read directly after reading it, you're likely to retain 20 to 30% more of the information. Plus, you set an anchor down in the ocean where you can go back to that information and remind yourself of it. So as you're reading, you get to a line that you like and you underline it. Underlining it is studying it, which means it's retaining it. Or in this case, you don't want to write in the book, you get a sticky note and you slap the sticky note on the book and you write on the sticky note. Or you record on your Apple iPhone. Or you find ways to talk with your friends or keep notes in a journal or stick index cards into your text. It doesn't really matter how you annotate, it matters that you annotate and to know what your purpose is. How do you know what your purpose is? Well, the best way to do it is to ask. For every reading assignment you get, you should ask your professor or the police officer or your friend or your boss, why am I reading this? What's my goal? Is there some context I should know? Should I pay attention to particular elements? I'll give you an example. When I was in graduate school, I wasn't very bright. I was smart enough, but we had a student who was smarter than I was, and when the professor said, please read chapters 1, 2, and 3 for next Tuesday, the student sitting next to me raised her hand and said, hey doc, what are we reading these chapters for? And the professor lifted an eyebrow and said, you know, that's a great question. Chapters 1 and 2 are really just review, so you can skim those. Chapter 3 is where the serious stuff is, so spend a little more time there. Ta-ching! We just got saved, I don't know, an hour and a half of reading. Not that chapters 1 and 2 weren't important, but for the purpose of the reading, for the purpose of this class, for what the professor wanted us to produce, chapters 1 and 2 were just general information that he wanted skimmed. It was chapter 3 where he wanted to spend our time. So where should we spend our time? In chapter 3. But it's also true if you have a quiz or a test. Hey doc, what kind of information are we going to be tested on? What kind of questions might you ask? What will be the nature? Will it be essay? Will it be short answer? Will it be true or false? Fill in the blank. The more information you know about why you are reading, why you are studying, and how you will have to produce information after you read, the more efficient and enjoyable and productive your reading experience will be. There are lots of ways to annotate. You don't have to write in the text. You can use the electronic tools. Most of you have an electronic book for our class. There is a highlighting tool and there is a note-taking tool where it will attach a note wherever in the text you want to keep one. It doesn't matter how you do it. What matters is that you do it. Let's see, I think I'm a little off here. Now, it might seem counterintuitive that annotation will save you time, but I'm here to tell you, with 20 years of experience of annotating effectively and teaching others how to do it, that you will save enormous amounts of time. Why? For two reasons. One is, part of annotation is you set the amount of time that you're going to use to read. You say to yourself, I got 10 pages in this chapter, I'm going to give myself half an hour. You set a timer, you turn off your spouse, you turn off the dishwasher, you turn off the dogs, Instagram, Facebook, the phone, everything gets turned off, because for that 20, 30 minutes, what you're doing is annotating. And you do it. And you don't lose focus, you stay focused, and then you're done. And then you reward yourself. You go for a walk, you eat some cookies, you do some push-ups, you go out and whistle at the birds. You do anything you want to reward yourself for spending that dedicated time, focused time on reading. There have been some fascinating studies that show that students who try to multitask waste on average 40% of the time. In other words, if you read for 40 minutes, focused, then you just earned yourself 20 minutes to go do whatever you want. You'll be surprised the first couple times you try it how much reading you can get done in a short amount of time when you're focused, when you have your goal. Here's another reason it saves you time. Not just that you establish time, but that you know what you're doing, where you're going, and so you avoid problems. Imagine you want to go out to, Rio Doso, to the mountains there, and someone says, go climb that mountain, which is equivalent to read that chapter. And so you wander off and you start climbing and you get lost over here and there's a grizzly bear, so you have to go back around and you find out over there, oh gosh, there's a bunch of brambles, I have to go back this way. And now you might eventually get to the top and you certainly had an adventure. But if you had said, well, why am I climbing the mountain? What's the best path up the mountain? What should I be doing while I'm on the mountain? Then you would still have enjoyed and had an adventure, but you would have done it without all the heartache and trauma. Because imagine when you get down from the mountain and I say, where are the berries? And you say, what berries? And I say, well, now we're going to make a berry pie from the berries you collected on the mountain. But you didn't collect any berries. And so now you have to go back and do it again, and this time collect the berries. That's the same as reading a text. If I say to you, you're going to write an essay, then as you are reading, you're collecting quotations, you're gathering ideas, you're thinking through what you might want to talk about, so that when you get to the end of the text, you're ready to write. You're ready to begin your exploration. You don't have to read it again because you had a purpose. You knew why you were reading, and you read with that goal in mind. It's a little bit like a sports team. Let's imagine that our class is a giant soccer club, and we're ready to play for the championship. We have two choices. One is we get to the field, the pitch, the day of the game, and we jump out and we start playing. And they shoot and score, so we know that guy's their shooter. And then they dribble and pass and score, so we know that guy's their passer. And then they bolt. So at halftime, we're down 10-0 because we spent the first half of our time figuring out who their players were, what their plays were. We didn't pre-read, which is the second choice. We didn't pre-read the team and come in knowing that number 2 is the dangerous player, that number 3 likes to push, that number 4 is their long-range shooter, but number 5 can only shoot in close, and that their goalie has a special affinity for the corners. Now that we know that, when we go into the reading, when we go into our purposeful reading, we know how to get through it. What does this mean in terms of a text? This means skim the text before you read it. Is there any introductory material to read? Is there a summary? Are there questions at the back that would focus you on what's going to be important? Are there bold statements? Is it organized in some specific way? The more you know about the text, the more you are likely to be able to enter it easily, move through it carefully. Figure out the context. Pre-read a little bit. I know you don't believe me yet, so here's what we're going to do. I'm going to give you a series of numbers from 1 to 100. I want you to find number 1. I want you to find number 2. Etc. Get as high as you can. I'm only going to give you 10 seconds. Find number 1, find number 2. Let's see how high you can get in 10 seconds. Ready? Go. Well, how high did you get? Most folks in 10 seconds can get to 5, 4, some get to 7, 8. I've had someone get to 10 once before, but I think they were fibbing. I'm not sure it was true. It's hard when you have a chaotic field in front of you and you don't know the organization, if you don't know who the good players are, it's going to be confusing. So let me give you a little pre-reading on that number chart. I have divided the field into quadrants. In the top right, you'll find number 1. In the bottom right, you'll find number 2, and then number 3, and then number 4, and they go clockwise in coordinates. So where 1 is, you'll also find 5. All I've done is give you a simple organizational pattern to this text. I've told you what the chapters are, what the themes are, what kinds of ideas you should be looking for, and now you're ready to count again. 10 seconds. Same numbers, now they're divided. Go. I bet you did a lot better that time. I know you did. Many people will double their reading, and this is why I'm telling you that learning to read with annotation is more efficient. You can double your retention. You can double what you bring back to your experience in the classroom, in the business world, wherever you need to have this experience. So what's the strategy? The strategy is ask your professor, ask yourself, even write it out. What is my goal? How much time am I dedicating to this reading experience? Gather as much information as you can about the text, and then do your reading. Do your reading with a purpose. Climb that mountain, and while you are climbing the mountain, also gather the berries for the pie. Don't forget to reward yourself. Now there is a master annotator. It's got all the elements I'm talking about. A little bit of highlighting, a little bit of underlining, some squares and circles, some summary, some text here, some text there. Lots of great stuff. Which brings me to a final point. One of the main ideas of annotation is that you figure out what's important to you, and you're trying to make it less complicated. In some ways, this annotation is more complicated. And this was a guy who was working on a PhD, so he needed to make it more complicated. He had a lot he wanted to work with, but that is not necessarily your goal. But it's also why you should use a pen or a pencil more than a highlighter, because a highlighter, everything looks the same. But a pen or pencil will allow you to say, this is what's important. This is the key. Oh, this is not so important. It allows you to distinguish between and discriminate among the elements that might be valuable to you. You know, what I've just taught you is so easy even cats could do it. Oh, well, I guess she couldn't. She fell asleep. Annotation is a system. It's a system that you will use for your entire academic experience, and that we will use for every element of our time together in our course. Know your purpose. Set a goal. Set a time. Read, annotate, and then use the information that you have found.